Something strange is happening in Texas. Texas, a state whose identity and economy was built on oil and gas, has been the #1 wind-powered state for over a decade. And in 2024, Texas dethroned California as the #1 solar state. I'll explain what's happening to Texas's old oil and gas industry now that the state is leading the nation in solar and wind power. In the 1900s, Texas was America's #1 fossil fuel state, completely by accident. 1901, Spindletop. A drilling crew was replacing a worn-out bit on a well when mud started bubbling. Then, 6 tons of drill pipe shot out of the ground, followed by an explosion of black liquid, 150 feet into the air, spewing the equivalent of 100,000 barrels a day for 9 days before anyone could even figure out how to cap it. By 1902, that single field was producing 18 million barrels of oil a year, 20% of all U.S. output. Before Spindletop, America's oil industry was in Pennsylvania. After Spindletop, it was Texas, and it never left. And then, almost 100 years later, Texas got lucky again. In 1998, a Texas engineer figured out how to use high-pressure saltwater spray to crack open underground shale rocks, exposing natural gas, fracking. And Texas sits atop some of America's richest shale rock formations. Texas was the fossil fuel state. Now, Texas leads the country in renewables. What happened? What made Texas the place for wind and solar? Well, Texas keeps getting lucky. Look at this map of the annual average wind speed across the US. Where does the wind blow? In this band right here. North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and of course Texas. And yet, they're not building wind to nearly the extent that Texas is. You see the same in solar. Yes, Texas has a natural advantage. It's big and it gets lots of sun, but so do New Mexico, Arizona, and California, and still Texas leads all of them. Texas is geographically blessed when it comes to wind and sunlight, but it's not uniquely blessed. Why is Texas beating its peer states? Well, there's one thing that Texas has that they don't: workers. And more specifically, the right kind of workers. For more than a century, Texas has trained an enormous workforce to do a very specific type of job. Go to some place in the desert that's hot, flat, and dusty, build something giant and industrial, and then drive home. Installing an oil rig and installing a wind turbine both require welders, electricians, crane operators, construction managers, and people who will show up to pour concrete foundations in 100-degree heat on land that's an hour from the nearest town. In 2023, the New York Times interviewed a petroleum engineer who spent 19 years working in the oil industry before switching to wind and solar projects. In his words, the basics are the same. We install foundations, we install turbines, we build roads, and we lay cables. Texas has almost 1 million energy workers. That's more energy workers than North Dakota has people. The same things that made Texas a titan in oil and gas are now making it the nation's leader in wind and solar. And it's not just about the blue-collar label. Houston has become the energy capital of the world, home of engineering firms and project financing people. When a solar developer needs to finance a 500-megawatt project in West Texas, they don't call Wall Street or Silicon Valley's Sand Hill Road to look for financing. They go to Houston, and they work with people who have spent the last 20 years financing oil wells. While the fossil fuel industry was extracting energy from Texas, it was also building up an entire workforce and supply chain and entire financial ecosystem that is now prepared to build energy and to build it fast. And Texas's fossil fuel industry paved the way for clean energy in another way too. In most of America, if you want to build a new power plant, you need to get permission. The local utility, which usually has a monopoly, gets to decide what's built and by whom. And this process can be slow. Texas decided to do things differently. In 1999, the state separated the companies that generate power from the companies that deliver it. They created ERCOT, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. They manage the grid. Here's what makes Texas different. In most of the country, electricity markets pay power plants twice. Once for the electricity that they actually generate, and again just for existing, for keeping their plants available in case they're needed. That second payment is called capacity payment. It's sort of like a retainer that you have to pay someone to always be there on call, whether you use them or not. And that keeps older and more expensive power plants in business even when they're not competitive. ERCOT runs on what is called an energy-only market. Generators get paid for the electricity they actually produce and sell, and that's it. No bonus just for existing. If you can produce power and someone will buy it, you're in. And if you can't compete on price, you're out. That means that old, inefficient power plants don't get a free participation trophy. It's a ruthless system. Not everybody likes it, but it has a massive upside for new, cheap energy generation. And solar wins that battle in two ways. In an energy-only market, solar beats fossil fuels because it is basically free to run. Once you build the solar panels, it basically costs nothing to produce the next megawatt hour. Whereas with gas plants, you have to buy gas. And in a capacity market, the gas plants get money even when they're not running. They can collect money just for being on standby. But thanks to ERCOT, when solar floods the grid with cheap power at noon, and gas plants shut down because they can't compete on price, the gas plants don't get a dime. If solar can undercut gas on price, gas loses. The market does not care who built the power plant first. The irony of this whole system is that it was set up in 1999, when everybody assumed that the new companies to benefit from it would be in the fossil fuel industry. As one energy advisor put it, Texas's deregulated market was designed to make it easy to develop new oil and new gas resources. But those same rules make it even easier to develop renewables that can crush the old incumbents on price. So if you're a developer and think that you can make money by selling solar power in Texas, you don't need to persuade a utility board. You don't have to wait for a state energy plan. All you need to do is get the land, build the solar farm, connect it to the grid, and then sell your electricity to the market like any other commodity. So, unexpectedly, and yet again, Texas being the #1 fossil fuel state paved the way for it to become America's #1 solar energy state. It's tempting to say that Texas got out of the way and just let the market build, but a council that says anyone can build power plants only works if there's somewhere for those power plants to plug into the grid. See, the downside that renewable sources like solar and wind have compared to fossil fuels is that when you have fossil fuels, you get to choose where and when you burn them. You can take oil or gas or coal and ship it. You can ship it by pipeline, by rail, by tanker, and you can send it to wherever the demand is. Gas arrives in Houston through a pipeline, and it's burned mere miles away from the people who actually need the electricity. The fuel travels, the power plant stays put. Wind and solar completely flip this around because you can't ship sunlight and you can't pipe wind. The energy is wherever nature puts it. If you take wind from West Texas and use it in Austin or Dallas, you have to build transmission lines that carry the electricity from where it is generated to where the people actually live. This is the thing that makes renewable energy hard. It is not enough just to build solar panels or wind turbines. The hard part isn't generating the electricity. The hard part is the electrical highway that takes that energy from the empty part of the state to the crowded part of the state. If you try to rely on the market to solve this problem, you end up with a classic chicken and egg problem. Developers don't want to build wind farms without transmission lines to carry the electricity, but nobody wants to build transmission lines without wind farms. Who goes first? Texas solved this problem in 2005 with Senate Bill 20, which told the Public Utility Commission to do something unusual: identify the best wind zones in the state, and then build transmission to reach them before the generator showed up. They called them Competitive Renewable Energy Zones, CREZ. And less than a decade later, Texas had high-voltage transmission lines extending to the Texas Panhandle. If you build it, they will come. That was the philosophy, and it worked. To explain just how big of a deal this was for wind power, before CREZ, wind energy had wind curtailment. That's energy that wind turbines generated but wasted because the grid couldn't carry it. A whopping 17% of all wind energy was just being wasted this way. Then, after CREZ built their high-voltage transmission lines, the amount of wasted power dropped to nearly 1%. With so much energy connected to the grid, Wholesale electricity prices fell to a historic low. Texas had spent $7 billion on transmission lines, and it paid off almost immediately. And it'll continue paying off for the next 30 to 50 years that those transmission lines are rated for. But all of this was in the service of wind power. CREZ studies happened in 2006 before solar was affordable and abundant. But the transmission line doesn't care what kind of electricity it carries, and all of that is great for solar. But solar has one big problem. It's an obvious one. Every night, the sun goes down. Midday, everything's peachy. Solar panels across West Texas are flooding the grid with cheap electricity. Even with everyone's air conditioning running at full blast, the solar energy is so cheap and so abundant that it's not even profitable for gas plants to turn on. But then something happens around 6 p.m. As the sun dips toward the horizon, the solar output crashes while demand stays the same. Batteries can deal with part of this, but batteries are expensive to build. Most batteries on the Texas grid are 2-hour batteries that are able to provide early evening energy, when the sun is down but demand is still high. Once people start turning off their appliances, the demand for energy plummets, so building a 4-hour battery is just too expensive. So, all the gas power plants that were napping at noon suddenly have to chug back to life. And here's the good news about natural gas turbines. They can spin up fast. Gas plants are not like coal plants or nuclear power plants that can take hours or days to come online. A gas plant can go from cold to full output in mere minutes. And Texas has a massive fleet of gas power plants that are waiting and ready to come on when the sun starts dipping. In fact, natural gas still provides 43% of all electricity on the ERCOT grid. Solar farms and natural gas plants might seem like natural rivals, but solar doesn't replace gas. Solar needs gas, at least for now. Take away the gas and you can't have a solar success story. That is the most surprising thing about Texas's success as a renewable energy powerhouse. This isn't a story about one energy source replacing another. It's a story about a state that became the best at building energy. And when a new green power source got cheap enough, Texas built that too. California has always been pro-renewables in theory. It was one of the first states to start building solar. But while California had an early lead, plenty of money, and plenty of sunshine, Texas had a system that was better at saying yes to new energy infrastructure. Texas has never had a reputation as a green state. In fact, Texas still leads the country in oil and gas. But over the past decade, Texas has beaten other states like California at building solar because they treat it like a commodity and not an identity. If it's cheap and someone will buy it, they build it. Several times in this video, I said that Texas got lucky, and that is sort of correct. Texas was sitting on the oil, and it had the shale rocks, and it's also at the intersection of the Sun Belt and the Wind Belt. But luck doesn't build transmission lines. Progress can only happen if we are consciously aware that it can happen, and we consciously decide to make it happen. So subscribe for more stories like this one.